Hello and welcome back to 5-Minute Bibliography from Pickwoad Library. I am, as ever, your host, Dr. Jamie Cumby, and I'm joined today by a very special guest. This is Fredson Bowers, my very lovely assistant, and he may interject over the course of this episode, but don't worry about him. To be fair, it's his house too. So let's circle back to the topic at hand. This week we're going to talk about bookbinding, and the topic for this episode actually came from a viewer request. So in that spirit, I would like you guys, if anything has come up for you over the course of watching this series, something you'd like to learn more about, something you were curious about, something that didn't make sense to you, send us your questions, and on next week's episode, I'm going to try and answer some of those in a kind of mailbag segment. So leave a comment at the end of this video or shoot an email over to specialcollections@pequotlibrary.org. We would love to hear from you. So let's just dive right into bookbinding, shall we? This week is going to build on some of the episodes that we've done earlier, specifically when we're talking about format. So remember, this is that demo quarto that I've shown you before. So after we've got our sheet of paper that has been carefully imposed and typeset and printed, and then assembled into its constituent parts so that it actually reads front to back, we're going to talk about what happens next. So one thing I want you to notice is that this paper, once folded, has this kind of seam here. That translates into how it is bound together into things that we call gatherings, which are literally gatherings of pages or leaves and sheets. And here's a great way that you can take a peek at this here. I'm just using this little pamphlet because you can see, if you look at that end bit right there, I'm hoping that's focusing, you should be able to see, and you can take a book off your shelf at home and try and do this too. See how you've got, like that little example I showed you here. I'm just gonna kind of chunk one out so you can see it. Come on, buddy. Excuse me, please hold. There we are. So you see that right there? That is a gathering. So when we join up all the printed sheets of a book, oh, Buster's here too. When we join up all the printed sheets of a book, we join it up into these gatherings of sheets, and then you have to join those gatherings together, and that's where the bookbinding process comes in. I'll also circle back and say, the bookbinding processes that I'm going to run you through today are a traditional Western bookbinding practice that emerges out of a tradition that first develops in Egypt with the birth of the codex. You've probably heard the word codex before. It is just a way of referring to how we traditionally construct books. So that is to say, books with text, like pages, between two surfaces to protect them. But the very first codices didn't actually look like what I'm going to be talking you through today. Coptic books, those are the books made by the Coptic Christians in Egypt, are made where the gatherings themselves are only sewn to each other. There isn't like a central support system. So that's just kind of a programming note. We're talking about a very specific Western tradition of bookmaking right now. So this isn't the be-all, end-all on bookbinding. This is a very specific type of bookbinding, and you can learn a lot more about bookbinding with the exhibition that we did called Cover to Cover, which we've got some really fun activities from that you'll find through the education programs on our website. And we're hoping to have some more digital media around that coming out soon. So anyway, jumping back into our book construction, when we're joining our gatherings of sheets together, the bookbinder, once he has them folded up, sets them in front of something that almost looks like a loom, where you'll have these central supports that you're going to sew your gatherings of pages around. And you chunk your text block into this, this support system, and gathering by gathering, you go in and you loop around and you sew through the center point. Actually, it would be easier to show you on this. So you'd be punching through here and here, or if you've got a larger, more complicated book, you might have as many as 5 supports to sew it onto those cords. The supports can either be fiber cords, they can be like skin, like tawed hide, or if you're a very fancy chic book, they can even be silk ribbons. And it's this methodical process of affixing your sets of sheets to these supports so that they'll be able to open and close like a traditional book. And I've got this rather beat up friend to show you to demonstrate. And I'm actually really glad that this guy is in such poor shape because you can look into his guts. So what you're looking at here, do you see right there? It looks like it's kind of been, here, we're even gonna take that front board off. This bit right here, that fibrous part, that is a frayed end of one of the cords around which this book has been sewn. And one thing that's really different about this book, which is from 1818, is that you'll see here the cords have been sewn in. It looks like someone's kind of sawed into there, which is literally what happened. So the cords are recessed cords. They're not raised bands. You see raised bands in earlier books because recessed cords make things a lot easier and quicker to do. So that sort of speeds up the production process. It's kind of a way of cutting corners a little bit. So you see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cords there around which this little book has been sewn. And you also see there are all of your gatherings that, see there how they're loose here, but then they're affixed here. So that's where the support system comes in, and that's what makes it possible to open this book up and manipulate it, because all the pages have these pieces running through them that connect it. And also, it is through these cords that the book is connected to the rest of the pieces of what we normally think of a book. So we think about the covers, right? The cover is more like, unless you're talking about a case binding, where you've made your cover all in one piece and then you're attaching it with some kind of glue mechanism to your sewed text block or a glued text block. More traditional Western bookbinding has your boards, which used to be wooden boards, but then to cut costs and cut corners, you get something called pasteboard. You can see it's a kind of like cardboard. You see that right there? And you attach your boards to the spine of the book by pasting the ends of the cords onto them like that. And you can actually see on this board where we've got sort of the ghost of that last really frayed, not so sturdy cord right there. You see how that's pasted over? And this paper on here is what's called a paste down, literally because it's pasted down onto the back of the board so you don't see this kind of messy, unfinished thing where you've got your leather wrapped around it. And you can also see that because it's constructed in this way where your the support material is here, sewn in, and it's here, affixed to the outside, the weakest part of a book that's constructed in this way is always going to be on these joints of the spine to the boards. And that's why when you're handling early books, you want to be real careful about how you support them. So that is my teeny crash course into some aspects of bookbinding. And just as a reminder, next week, we hope that you'll send in some questions. Have a great week, guys.